Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us on this Friday afternoon. Wanted to welcome you all to Adulting 101, Student Loans and Financial Literacy. My name is Stacey Albanese. I'm Associate Director of Annual Giving and Alumni Engagement here at Montclair State University. And the Office of Annual Giving and Alumni Engagement are proud to continue this partnership with the Center for Leadership Development, as well as now, with today's webinar, the partnership with Financial Aid. This is the last of our summer series of Adulting 101 topics, but hopefully we'll be able to bring you some more tips and pointers throughout the academic year. Today we have with us Stanley Fils, class of 2009 and 16 MBA, financial aid counselor, as well as joined again by Jill Ploskonka 05 from the Center for Leadership Development. They're going to share with us some real-life tips and pointers about financial literacy and student loan options. So now I'm pleased to hand it over to Stanley.
Hello, everyone. Glad to be here. My name is Stanley Fils. Again, I am a financial aid counselor at Montclair State University, class of 2009, and I have been working here as a financial aid counselor since graduation, really, probably about 2-3 months after graduation. With that, we'll jump right into today's webinar discussing loan repayment and financial literacy. Some of the topics that we'll be going over today is loan repayment and all the postgraduate tips that come along with that. We'll get into loan forgiveness a little bit, talking about budgeting and establishing a good credit score or repairing your credit score if you've already done a little bit of damage to it. All right, so get started here. Topic number 1. Uh-oh. Bear with me here. I just get a little frozen.
Just while Stanley's pulling this up and dealing with a minor technical difficulty, folks, you're welcome to submit questions throughout the course of the webinar in the questions box on your screen. We will be saving all of our questions until the end of the webinar. We will be asking you guys to answer some poll questions to keep things interactive. So at a couple points during the presentation, I'll chime in and ask you all to participate in a poll question to help us drive the conversation further. And then again, Jill and Stanley will get to all of your questions at the end of the presentation, but feel free to submit them whenever they come to mind.
And while we wait on Stan, Stan got it, go ahead.
Seems to be back up and running there. Sorry about that, guys. So first topic today is loan repayment. I always advise students to kind of put together sort of a to-do list, whether they're beginning the loan repayment process, whether they've already been in it for a few months or a few years. This is a kind of comprehensive look at all things you need to know about the repayment process. And if you kind of go through this at least once a year, at the very least once every other year, you'll be in really good shape to paying your loans in a timely manner while saving yourself money, not extending your loans and dragging them out too long. So going on to this to-do list, now, first and foremost, review your loan summary. All right, I cannot emphasize this enough. Oftentimes, students do not even have a clear understanding of what their loan summary even is, what their outstanding principal is, what their interest is, or how much interest they're actually accumulating on their loans daily, and how much they're paying monthly, and what of that is actually going towards the principal amount, and how much of it is actually going towards the interest on the loan. Next, we have complete the exit counseling. The exit counseling, I guess the best way I can describe it is it's about a 10 to 15 minute question and answer. It's pretty interactive. You'll work by reading a paragraph or so, answering a true and false question, answering a fill in the blank question. Really, the point of this is to make sure that you get a clear understanding of your terms and rights as a student loan borrower and all the benefits that student loans come with compared to private loans. You want to compare repayment plans, and today I have the 8 different repayment plans that are available to student loan borrowers. We'll go through all those, and you can kind of ask questions about where you fit in that picture as it relates to which repayment plan might be best for you. We'll get into all that a little bit later. We'll definitely jump into loan consolidation. That's something that everyone should consider, in my opinion, but it's not for everyone. Loan consolidation definitely comes with its pros and cons. So when we discuss that, hopefully you get a better idea of where you fit in that mix and whether or not loan consolidation is something that you should seriously consider. And lastly, the last tip I can offer you is just keep in touch with your loan lender. Oftentimes, people kind of get the jitters when it comes to handling and managing their loans, along with some other finances, which is totally normal. But best advice is to definitely keep in touch with your loan lender. They are aware of all the loan debt that you have to pay back and how long that might take you. They're the ones who really manage how much you'll be paying each month. And so you want to have very thorough conversations with them to make sure that you have the ball going the direction that you feel is feasible to your financial picture. So review and understand your loan summary. Every single loan borrower has an account that they can log on this website here, www.nslds.ed.gov. This is a comprehensive look of your entire loan history, really. All your loans that you borrowed, whether it have been undergrad or grad school. You'll be able to see who your lender is, because when you borrow loans from the federal student aid, it is assigned to a loan servicer. That's the loan servicer that you pay back each month. So you may borrow a loan and it's assigned to Great Lakes or Wells Fargo or a number of different lenders, and that will be the lender that you work together with paying back your loans. All right, so you can see this comprehensive list on NSLDS, which stands for the National Student Loan Database System, I believe. And you'll be able to see your outstanding principal, your outstanding interest accrued on each loan, and your total loan borrowing debt altogether. Next, completing the exit counseling and use the repayment estimator. So again, we went over the exit counseling. That's that 10 to 15-minute question and answer or so. You can actually complete that on studentloans.gov. To log in to studentloans.gov and the NSLDS website, you'll actually need something called an FSA ID and password. This is the password that you might have used to complete your FAFSA application if you are a recent graduate. If you've been out of school for a bit of time now, you probably don't have an FSA ID and password. You'll just simply need to create one in order to log on to the NSLDS website and the studentloans.gov website. Once you are logged into the studentloans.gov website, you can complete the exit counseling and use the repayment estimator. The repayment estimator is actually a very cool tool. I recommend this to both current students and alumni all the time. Before you even contact your loan servicer to discuss repayment plans, you can actually use the repayment estimator to get an early look at which plans you may be eligible for and see estimates for how much you would pay monthly and overall. The best thing about the repayment estimator is this is not just for students who have not yet begun the repayment process. If you've already been paying your loans, you could have been paying your loans for years. You can log on to studentloans.gov, use this repayment estimator, and see how your payments would look like, even if you've already started repayment. You can compare different repayment plans to see, all right, under this repayment plan, I'm paying, hypothetically speaking, $400 a month, but under this repayment plan, I'd be paying $250 a month, and how that would impact the interest you would ultimately end up paying and the total amount of the loan you would end up paying. So that's a very useful tool. I 100% suggest or recommend that you log on to studentloans.gov, try out that repayment estimator. It doesn't cost anything. It's very easy to use. And oftentimes it helps you get a much better understanding of your monthly and overall debt obligation.
That's a really great tip. And Stanley, this might be a great time for me to launch a poll to our attendees.
Yeah, sure.
So folks, you can see the poll is open. The question is, do you have a handle on how much student loan debt you owe? And I think this is a really good time for us to get a sense of that. So if you guys can take a few moments to answer those for us, that would be great.
That's great. I often I go around different schools in New Jersey and different organized events where I speak with both current and former students all the time. And one thing that is a recurring theme is that most students really don't actually have a handle on how much student loan debt they owe. Oftentimes students kind of avoid that altogether because of the depression that brings. Um, but it is really important to know what that number is. It's really important to know how much interest you're accruing daily and monthly. Once you get an understanding of all this, however scary it may be, it really has a way of helping you understand what it is that you want to accomplish in paying back your student loans and where you are currently. Helps you set goals and things of that nature. Looks like the poll results are up.
Yep, so the good news is most of the attendees here at least have a handle on it, and the rest of the gang says somewhat. So luckily there's no one in the audience who has no handle on it, so that's a good start.
That's great. That's great. All right, and then hopefully at the end of this presentation here, and after you do some review, you'll have a much better understanding, kind of speaking to those somewhats of the group here. All right, so moving forward, failure to prepare is preparing to fail. So we have the different repayment plan options that we are going to go over with you today. These repayment plans are the repayment plans that are offered under the Federal Student Aid Program. So when you borrow your federal loans, you may or may not be eligible for the 8 different repayment plan options. However, if you use that repayment estimator that I told you about earlier, or if you contact your lender to kind of ask about what you may or may not be eligible for, they'll be able to walk you through this. And the repayment estimator does a really good job of telling you flat out what programs you do qualify for and which ones you do not qualify for. So first and foremost, we have the standard repayment plan. All right, this is the repayment where payments are fixed amount that ensures your loans are paid off within 10 years. No matter how much it is that you borrowed, you will be paying that back within 10 years. Under the standard repayment plan, the payments tend to be higher because you are paying the full amount of your loans back within that 10-year period. But you do save the most in interest. Now, the second repayment plan is the graduated repayment plan. Payments are lower at first, and over time they increase, usually every 2 years, and are for an amount that will ensure your loans are paid off within 10 years. So you'll still pay it back within that 10-year period, but it's going to be a graduated repayment schedule. So the idea is that when you first begin your career or enroll in this payment plan, you'll be at a place where you're not able to make those high monthly payments, $700 a month, $800 a month, depending on how much it is that you borrowed. So this is a popular option for students who know that as they advance in their careers, it'll come with additional income, but kind of to start off in those entry-level positions, you're not quite at that point yet where you can handle those standard repayment monthly payments. Next, we have extended repayment. So this is the first repayment plan where you'll move out of that 10-year repayment period and you'll jump into a much longer repayment period. So payments may be fixed or graduated and will ensure that your loans are paid off within 25 years. All right, so this is a very popular option, obviously, because stretching your loan out over 25 years will allow you to minimize your monthly payments again, but you'll really lose out on the back end when it comes to interest. You'll accrue much more interest over time, and the repayment estimator will actually be able to help you break down how much interest you'll end up paying over time and how much your total overall repayment amount, both towards principal and interest, will actually be. Next, we have the revised pay as you earn repayment plan. This was an update that the Obama administration put into place, which was, I guess, your update on the pay as you earn repayment plan. So the pay as you earn repayment plan takes, it breaks your monthly payments within 10% of your discretionary income, but never more than you would have paid under the 10-year standard repayment plan. All right, this is a very popular program because of that 10% of discretionary income. Regardless of what it is that you're making or what it is that your bills might be, when you're only required to cover 10% of your discretionary income, this puts you at an advantage when it comes to reducing your monthly payments. You'll probably see the smallest monthly payments under both the revised pay-as-you-earn repayment plan and the pay-as-you-earn repayment plan. The only difference between the pay-as-you-earn repayment plan and the revised pay-as-you-earn repayment plan really is who the loan is eligible, or who the repayment plan is actually eligible for. There used to be loans called FFELP loans, and those loans were recently transitioned to what's called direct federal loans under the Federal Student Aid Department. And so the revised pay-as-you-earn repayment plan are eligible to all those direct loans, whereas the pay has a little bit of a different rules. There are plenty of information on these different repayment plans that will break down the fine details that we don't have the time to go over today. All you have to do is put in a simple Google search, student loan repayment plans, and all the information will come up on studentaid.gov to kind of walk you through that process. We'll revisit these in a bit when we talk about loan forgiveness, because that will be important to understanding your options and what repayment plan you are limited to or will be automatically enrolled into. We'll get to that in a bit. Next, we have the income-based repayment plan. This is where your payments will be either 10% or 15% of your discretionary income. That depends on when you receive your first loan. But again, it's never more than you would have paid under the 10-year standard repayment program. This one is great as well. They limit your monthly repayment, again, based on your discretionary income. However, this does drag out the repayment of the loan between 20 years and 25 years. And again, that comes with more interest. So that's always something that you want to consider when choosing your payment plan. Then we have the income contingent payment plan, or ICR for short. This is similar to the income-based repayment plan, where this will actually schedule your payment plan to be lesser of the two, 20% of your discretionary income, or the amount you would pay on a repayment plan with a fixed payment over 12 years. Again, just speaking all of this over to you guys through a webinar can seem kind of complex and maybe a little overwhelming. No need to worry. If you use a repayment calculator or look up these repayment plans online, they'll have very accurate and clear breakdowns for you guys to go over that will really lay this out so that it's clearly understood and easy to kind of choose which plan you think fits best for you. And lastly, we have the income sensitive repayment plan, where your monthly payment is based on your annual income, but your loan will be paid in full within 15 years. So this is kind of like a mix of the standard repayment plan and the stretched out repayment plans, where you're allowed to repay over the course of 25 years, or 25 years rather. You save a little bit of interest on this, but your payments may be a little higher because it's going by your annual income instead of just your available discretionary income, like some of the other repayment plans. I don't know if we want to take a quick break here after going over all of those repayment plans, just to see what any of our
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Yeah, and we have another poll that I think this is great after hearing some of those options that I'm going to ask our attendees to take here in just a second. So the question is, do you feel that your student loan debt is it holding you back and preventing you from things like getting married, buying a house, switching careers, buying a car, things like that, managed but still stressful, completely under control, or do you not have any student loan debt? So we'll give you folks a minute to take that poll, and we'll
this is actually a great question. I often speak to people who are unsure, especially of choosing a payment plan. They're unsure which direction they want to go. And the advice I often offer is the best route to go in deciding which repayment plan to go with is not just the monthly amount that you'll be required to pay, but also your goals. It's really important that you take your goals into consideration. If you plan on buying a home, if you plan on getting married or moving across the country, that will determine where you want to be as far as your repayment plan is concerned. So kind of starting with your goals and the monthly amount that you can even afford are two places where I always recommend start there, and the rest of the answers will kind of fall together, fall in place once you have a clear understanding of those two.
That's great. So I'm going to close the poll for responses and share with everyone what the audience has here. So it looks like more than half of the audience says that they're managed but still stressful. And then that brings us to holding us back and preventing us from things. A small group said it's completely under control, and we did have a few folks who do not currently have any student loan debt as of now.
Great. It's interesting, the 28% that said it's holding them back or preventing them from things. That's always an interesting concern, because there may be ways around that. Oftentimes students feel like they want to either buy a home or do different things, and I don't want to call them loopholes, but there are options that you can take or consider to kind of put yourself in a position where your student loans are not necessarily holding you back, and you can learn to kind of manage them or work around whatever issue that they may be presenting in your life at any given point. We'll discuss that. So if you have any specific questions, please feel free to ask them, and we'll get to them later in the webinar.
Great.
All right, so next we are going to get into loan consolidation. This is a very popular topic. I'm often asked about loan consolidation. It's a little bit of a confusing landscape, much more confusing than choosing one of the various repayment plans. For those of you who don't know what loan consolidation is, if you have multiple federal student loans and want to simplify your payments, one option is to consolidate your debt into one lump sum loan. One popular option is a direct consolidation loan with the Federal Student Aid Department, but you're not limited to that. There are private lenders who offer consolidation loan, but you want to be careful when you get involved with private consolidation loans. They don't have many of the terms and very interesting and beneficial benefits that come with the student loans or the federal direct consolidation loans. So that's definitely something you want to research before you make any decisions. But loan consolidating or consolidating your loans may or may not be a good idea. That's why I put here that it's not for everyone. I can't emphasize that enough. Right now, under your standard repayment plan or whatever repayment option that you are making payments on each individual loan that you have borrowed under your name. So if you have 5 different loans, you are making 5 different payments per month. People who have more loans than that, if you have 12 different loans, you're making 12 different payments. So you can imagine how this can kind of feel overwhelming if you have to make so many different payments to so many different lenders, especially if you have different loan servicers managing your student loans. For example, at one point, I remember I had Sally Mae that was managing some of my student loans and Great Lakes that was managing others. And I had to make payments to both, which kind of got complicated. So in that case, loan consolidation may be beneficial to you, but you definitely want to review both the pros and cons, and we'll kind of go through that a little bit here. So when you consolidate your loans, the federal government issues you a new loan for the amount of your old ones. Moving forward, you'll then have one single payment on one large loan rather than several smaller loans. The interest rate on a direct consolidation loan is actually fixed. So that means it will stay the same for the length of your loan. What you need to know is that the rate or the interest rate is a weighted average of the interest on your previous loans. So oftentimes, students will have one loan with an interest rate of 6.8%, another loan with an interest rate of 5%, another with an interest rate of 3.45. It all depends on the year that you borrowed your loans. If you choose to consolidate your loans, they will take the weighted average of the interest. So you actually have the ability or the option to pick and choose which loans you want to consolidate. So let's say you have 10 different loans, all various interest rates, but some of your larger interest rates or some of your smaller interest rates, depend on how you want to work it. You prefer to keep them separate. You'd rather pay them off themselves. Maybe the balance is very small and you don't want to lump it up into a large lump sum loan. You can actually keep those separate and just consolidate the ones that you see there will be a benefit to consolidating. You do have the option to pick and choose. Just know that the ultimate interest rate will be the weighted average of the loans that are going into that consolidation loan. So some of the pros to consolidating your loans is that you want a lower monthly payment. When you consolidate oftentimes when you consolidate your loans, you'll get one lower monthly payment. But again, lower monthly payments always equate to higher interest on the loan, higher interest on the loan. Another reason you might want to consolidate your loans is because you don't qualify for one of the income-driven repayment plans or loan forgiveness. In this case, consolidating to a direct consolidation loan might actually grant you that eligibility to sign up for those different programs. You may be in a position where you have variable interest, where your interest changes over time. It's not fixed for the life of the loan. If that's the case, you may want to consider consolidating your loans so that you have one fixed interest rate and you don't have to deal with any more surprises of your loans changing, especially if you feel like interest rates will be going up in the future. You do kind of want to make sure you understand the difference between consolidating your loans and refinancing. There are tons of private companies out there that will give you the option to actually refinance your loan. And that pretty much means that they're taking your current interest rate, which may be on the higher end, and they'll do their best to offer you a lower interest rate. So let's say your current interest rate is at 6.8%. Company comes along and says they'll offer you an interest rate of 4.5%. That's a pretty big difference, especially depending on how much in your total debt you have. That will make a significant difference on your monthly payment. So that might be an option for you. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to consolidate your loans. Maybe refinancing your loans is all that you need to do. You may want to save money over the length of your loan. That's often an option with refinancing. Not so much with loan consolidation. So you want to kind of be cautious before you jump the gun there and just consolidate your loans. But we can go over some cons of loan consolidation. So when you do consolidate your loans, unfortunately, you do end up paying oftentimes more interest over time. That's one biggie that I always kind of put out there for students to understand, that accumulated interest might do more harm than good when you consolidate your loans. Another con is that you can't consolidate private loans under the direct consolidation loan program. So any private loans that you have would be ineligible to consolidate under the direct consolidation loan program. Like I might have mentioned earlier, you lose some of the benefits. The federal loans that you get have some of the best terms and benefits available on the market. When you consolidate your loans, especially depending on the consolidation program, you often lose those benefits. And you may not feel it the day that you consolidate, but years later, where you're in a position where you have some sort of hardship and you want to defer or apply for forbearance on your loans, you may not have that opportunity. And we'll talk about deferment and forbearance a little bit more in a bit. So your lost grace period, that's a biggie. When you have a federal loan, you actually have a 6-month grace period to repay that loan. Before you have to begin repayment. If you consolidate your loans, that goes out the door. You typically start paying 2 months after loan consolidation is approved. So that's one thing to consider, the timing of it all. And lastly, there's no do-overs. Once you click that button and you are approved for loan consolidation, it's a one-time deal. There is no going back. You are stuck with the interest rate that you agreed to during the consolidation process. So again, this is one of those decisions where you don't want to take it lightly. It should be taken very seriously because there's no do-overs in this one. Now, for a brief second, I mentioned loan deferment and loan forbearance, specifically talking to those people who in the poll said that, it's kind of preventing them from doing things, or they're kind of concerned about it. There are two options. Again, whenever you're making a decision, you want to go over the pros and cons. But deferment, when you are actively enrolled at either the undergraduate or graduate level, your loans are in a process called deferment, or in a status called deferment. And deferment is simply your loan may or may not be accruing interest depending on the loan that you have, but you're not required to make any payments. If you have a subsidized federal loan, it's interest free. It's not accruing any interest while you're on deferment. If you're on forbearance, it is accruing interest. And the unsubsidized loan, no matter what your setup is, it is accruing interest. You're just not required to make any payments while it is under deferment or in forbearance. Oftentimes, some people face some sort of financial hardships. They may be planning for a wedding. You might be planning that, cross-country move, or expecting a new family member, whatever the case may be. If you feel like your loans are in a position where they're kind of prohibiting you from doing the things that you want to do and accomplishing some goals, you can apply for temporary deferment or forbearance. There are some stricter terms with deferment. Not everyone will be eligible to apply for deferment, in which case you'll be limited to the forbearance option. You can apply for deferment or forbearance for up to 1 year, I believe, on both your standard federal loans and the direct consolidation loan. So if that's something where you feel like, man, I just need to pay off this credit card debt that I've accumulated over the years, or I'm in the process of buying a house and there's so much going on, I have to leave a down payment. Maybe your car might have broken down. You have to pay all these expenses, or medical bills are kind of weighing down on you. Deferment or forbearance is oftentimes a very popular option to kind of just give you some temporary relief for up to 12 months while you get back on your feet. All right. With that, I don't know if we want to, this next bullet point is not much, so I'll just go into this before we take our next break here. Don't run and hide. I can't tell you how many times I have students that try and just pretend their student loans don't exist. If I just don't answer the phone, don't answer any emails, it'll just disappear. That's not the case. You want to call your lender and be transparent to discuss your repayment options, your repayment goals, or any difficulty you may be experiencing with making timely payments. Your lender can be your friend. All right. So you want to make sure that you have that relationship with them. They're aware of your repayment goals and other goals that you might have in your life, because they'll be the guys that will recommend the best course of action to take if you find yourself having difficulty making payments, meeting any repayment goals, or maneuvering your student loans around any of the life milestones, difficulties, or concerns you may be having.
Yes, Stanley, I think that's a great point. And this is something that Jill has touched on in other webinars that we've done too, in terms of any sort of debt, whether it's credit card debt or student loan debt. Running and hiding only makes things worse. It's better to call them and say, here's the position I'm in between jobs, or I'm, this, like you said, maybe an emergency came up where there was an unexpected expense, but it's so much better to work directly with them and keep them in the know than to end up in collections or have them go from your friend to your enemy.
Sure, exactly.
Jill, is there anything you wanted to add to this section?
No, not at this time. I have questions when we're ready for some.
Oh, great.
All right. So moving along here. See, loan consolidation. Okay, we kind of touched on this. If you have multiple federal student loans, you consolidate them into one single direct consolidation loan. It simplifies repayment. There may be trade-offs, and you want to understand the advantages and disadvantages of loan consolidation. So, loan forgiveness, popular topic here. There are a handful of loan forgiveness programs, and it seems like there are more and more loan forgiveness programs popping up each and every day. You want to be aware of these different programs. It's difficult for me to kind of just say what the different loan forgiveness programs are because there are so many. But a quick Google search should help you out. Probably the most popular loan forgiveness program is the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. If you work for a state or government entity, you can possibly enroll in this Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. And how it pretty much works is you will apply for this Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. They'll confirm that you work in an eligible industry or for an eligible employer. And once approved, they'll actually move your loan from whatever payment plan it is into the income-based repayment plans. They'll stretch out your loan to the maximum amount of payment years, 25 years, and they'll give you the lowest monthly repayment option. All right. Now, this is where you really have to pay attention. They automatically do this. It's part of the plan when you enroll in the public service loan forgiveness program. They do this on purpose because if they stretch it out for the full 25 years and have you pay the lowest monthly payment option, after 120 eligible payments, all right, that's 10 years, they will forgive the remaining amount of the loan entirely. Okay. Now, the problem with that is this. Let's say you are a firefighter and you're enrolled in this public service loan forgiveness program, or you're a teacher and you're at about year 7 and you decide, you know what, fighting fires is just no longer for me. I had one too many close calls and I'm calling it quits. Or you're a teacher and you just can't stand being in the classroom anymore. The students have gotten the best of you and you are calling it quits. Changing careers and moving to another industry. Unless you find yourself in another position where the public service loan forgiveness program is still eligible under that employer, you will now have accumulated tons of interest that you now have to pay back because your loan will no longer be forgiven. All right. And students find themselves in that area where they kind of decide, all right, I'm going to leave this industry and I'm no longer going to be eligible for this public service loan forgiveness program, or PSLF for short. And now they're saddled with even more debt than they started with, simply because they weren't making payments to repay or pay off the loan, but just kind of making payments, getting to those 120 eligible payments where the remaining amount of the loan is forgiven. But otherwise, these loan forgiveness programs are certainly invaluable. There are forgiveness options specific to selected repayment plans as well. So if you sign up for an income-based repayment plan, or the pay-as-you-earn repayment plan, or the repay repayment plan, you'll actually be automatically in a loan forgiveness program. You'll be allowed to forgive payments after a certain number of years. I forget what the numbers are, and they vary with the different repayment plans. So before you even if you don't work in an eligible industry or for an eligible employer, you can still be eligible for some sort of forgiveness program just based on the repayment plan that you chose. There's student loan forgiveness programs for teachers, student loan forgiveness program for nurses, and also for lawyers as well. Again, they're not limited to just these professions. These are just the more popular ones that I found and decided to include them in the presentation here. But again, a quick Google search and you'll find hopefully more than you need on different loan forgiveness programs that may be available. I personally have noticed that more and more of them are popping up each year. So if you're not currently seeing any loan forgiveness programs that fit your specific role, hopefully something will come up in the near future. Again, you can always ask your employer as well. Some employers are now providing programs to their employees. Sometimes they do come with some sort of stipulation, like you have to work there for a certain amount of years or whatever the case might be, but certainly ask your employer to see if that's one option that may be available to you. But review the terms carefully. Like I mentioned with the public service loan forgiveness program, the fine print matters when it comes to these programs. You don't want to do something and you're under the impression that your loan is going to be forgiven, but you missed a step or changed industries or employers, and you kind of fall by the wayside there. So next, we're going to get into budgeting. I have budgeting as a young professional here, but we're going to go over tips that will aid young professionals and seasoned vets alike. All right. Before we get into this, I didn't know if we wanted to take a quick break.
I do have a poll that is going to be relevant to this session, so I think that will help us guide the discussion. And just in the interest of time, we want to make sure we get through this section so that we can still take questions, have Jill share some insight, and take some questions from the audience. So I'll make this poll. This will be our last one. It's about savings. The main reason I struggle to save money is, and it's either we're looking at the income or, you know, the debt, that whole debt to income ratio that Jill has spoken about in some of her webinars. So I'll give you guys just a few moments to answer that poll, and then we'll let Stanley keep rolling.
All right.
And just for all the folks in attendance, we will share the slides as well as some links to the resources that Stanley's referring to with the attendees after the webinar. So no need to worry about that. All right, I'm going to close out this poll for collection and we'll share the results. So it looks like about half of the folks who responded said that it's an issue of income. And then
Sure.
it looks like we split halfway for the other two about student loans or all of the above. So let you analyze that a little bit.
All right.
All right.
Always needing more income, right? I hear that. So when it comes to budgeting, the great thing about budgeting, and I'm sure Jill has gone over this in previous webinars, is no matter what your income might be, budgeting is a great tool to help you kind of establish a way to make things work with what it is that you're currently earning. We all can set our goals for the future and our aspirations on what we want to earn, but what we're working with currently, we're limited with. And so we have to learn to play within that realm. So when creating a budget, you're down to really the basics, the extras, and savings, which is so important. Basics being things like food, rent, educational loans, the extras being short-term expenses and long-term goals like starting a business or owning a home, and savings, establishing an emergency fund, which is about 3 to 9 months worth of expenses. So income, the average millionaire has 7 different streams of income. For those of you who feel like your income is not substantial enough, this is something that you want to think about. Oftentimes we rely on just our employer's income or what we're making from our paycheck to kind of live off of. And for many people, you are possible to live off that one income. But if you are having trouble with your savings goals or with whatever the case might be, your investment goals, probably adding additional streams of income, however that might be, would probably be a good idea, whether it be picking up a part-time job, blogging on the side, whatever you feel might fit in your lifestyle. I'm a big fan of what's called the 50-30-20 rule, where 50% of your income should be reserved for needs, things like rent and food, etc. 30% of your income be reserved for wants, that vacation, that new car that you want. And 20% of your income is reserved for savings. If you follow this formula, it will not only kind of help you put a budget together, but really help you decide and cut expenses that you probably shouldn't have. Oftentimes, especially with recent graduates from undergrad, they often make decisions like buying a car that's more expensive than they could probably afford. And the quote that I'm a big fan of is, just because you can pay for it doesn't mean you can afford it. So when you have a budget together, that will help you kind of get a better understanding of the difference, what you can actually pay for and what can you really actually afford. All right, so why do we make budgets? To save for the future, save for want items, and monitor spending. We want to know where your money is going. So I'm a big fan of creating an annual budget, a monthly budget, and even a daily budget so that you can see, all right, after all my expenses are covered, my needs, my wants, how much do I have left for me on a day-to-day basis? When you see your daily budget, oftentimes it's a real kind of eye-opener, because you're saying, wow, that cup of coffee that I'm buying is biting into X amount of my daily budget that I have available on any given day. And it really helps you make smart decisions about your spending. Each budget is critical because they will help put your overall financial picture in perspective. Time is your best friend, so you want to start now. Now, we can get into questions. In the interest of time, I'll let Jill have at it so that we can get time to take some questions from our audience.
Thank you, Stan. So I'm going to
Sure.
give 2 perspectives, and then I'm going to turn to Stacy for any questions that we receive from our audience. So
Okay.
one thing I noticed in the last poll, and I'm just going to share my perspective and a little bit of insight here, and I'll end with a question. The question was, and the attendees said that they are struggling to save money. because their income is not substantial. And so I just kind of want to throw out there some advice that I received as I became, more knowledgeable about loans and what I could do. One thing to remember for all of you that may have said that, always remember that there could be promotions for you down the road. So if right now it's hard to save and it's hard to pay those student loans back, maybe reduce your payments for now. And yes, you'll pay a little bit more interest. But for me, that advice was really helpful because maybe you receive a 4% increase every year, or maybe you're going to get a new job in 2 to 3 years, and then you can increase those student loan payments. And that advice was helpful for me, not only with my student loans, but in my overall budget and in credit. Something else I just wanted to highlight, and this is where I'll turn to Stan for a question. With the PSLF, Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, one thing I want to highlight, and this is something I wasn't aware of because it was a new program after I graduated. I was on the wrong repayment program, and I have over 10 years in public service, so I did qualify. And so something I want to highlight to the audience is if you may qualify, maybe you meet those 10 years now, or maybe in a few years, and you can have that forgiveness. Please make sure you're on the right repayment plan, because for me, that was the hardest lesson learned. I had thought that I would be able to qualify, and I thought it would be a very easy write-off, and it was not. So really, knowledge is power, and so spend time researching into these programs and into what Stan spoke about today, because when you read it for yourself, you can really get a better grasp on how you can redirect your student loan repayment or consolidation or the public service loan forgiveness program. So on that note, Stan, what advice do you have, thinking about everything you shared, what is your biggest piece of advice for our audience when it comes to student loans, consolidation, and kind of staying clear and out of debt?
I think my biggest piece of advice is just being aware. If you're aware of how much interest you're accumulating, how much debt you actually have, that all encompassing debt to income ratio that seems to impact so many decisions. If you're aware of what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are, you're better able to plan. So my advice is just to get aware, start putting a plan together, knowing what your goals are, knowing what your limitations are, and how you can kind of get around them and alleviate some of those limitations that are kind of weighing down on you.
That's excellent advice, and I think very helpful for all of us. So
Yeah,
I'm going to turn to Stacy.
Great. Thank you, Stanley and Jill, for that insight. So I'm just going to go through a couple of our audience questions. The first one is similar to what Jill just asked, but this is specific to a certain age bracket. So what is the number one piece of advice you would give to my high school seniors as they start the college application process related to student loans?
Great piece of advice. As a financial aid counselor, I think my biggest piece of advice is to contact your financial aid office. Oftentimes, when students receive their award letter, their financial aid award letter, it doesn't include everything that the institution may be able to offer. I'm not entirely sure why. Maybe some schools just don't want to show their hand right up front. Maybe it's a matter of not offering you $15,000 if you'll be happy with $10,000. So one piece of advice is I always recommend that students contact the financial aid administrator, speak one-on-one with them, and ask them to review their account, and if they can offer anything else to kind of alleviate the burden of paying for tuition and fees and possibly even housing.
Great. Our next question is, can I make a payment toward my principal payment instead of it going to my interest? I think this is a pretty common question.
It is a very common question. And I've had students, so the answer is yes. When you just make a payment that's above and beyond what's due that month or whatever the case may be, it actually gets forwarded towards interest in following months. All right. For it to go completely towards the principal, your lender needs to know that. Sometimes people will write it right on the check, principal only, after making their payment that applies towards interest, because they will not allow you to make a principal only payment if you still have interest on loan. But if the interest is paid down and you'd like to pay towards a principal only, you're more than welcome to do that. But to pay it towards interest, if you just make a large payment, they'll actually apply it towards future interest that hasn't even accumulated yet if you do not express that you want it to go towards principal only.
Great. Okay. This question is in regards to how you broke up your savings. So the question was, is retirement savings included in that 20% that you were talking about?
So yes, that 20% is the bare minimum. And what most experts recommend is that you take that 20% down and you break it down. So let's say you have an emergency savings account for emergencies. Obviously, you have retirement, and you have an investment brokerage account with maybe like a Fidelity or one of those online brokerage firms. You would split that 20% among those however you see fit. However, the rule of thumb is that 20% of your monthly income should be going towards savings. You pay yourself first, and the rest of the funding that you have to work with, you apply that towards your wants and your needs.
Okay. Jill, did you have any other maybe more general questions? There's a couple questions left here, but I want to address those, I think, separately because they're a little bit, so maybe I will pass those along to Stanley and Jill and have them reach out to the folks who ask those questions because they're pretty specific. And I just want to remind everyone that Stanley and Jill are not financial advisors for anyone. They're sharing their experiences working here at the university and that they've gone through themselves. So I just want to remind folks that to avoid any confusion, but I will put any unanswered questions, I will send them over to our presenters after the fact. But Jill, were there any other questions or points that you wanted to raise at this time?
Sure. And Stan, you may have mentioned this, but I want to come back to this point. So the question is, how will my student loans impact my ability to buy a home? And I just also wanted to add, how do student loans specifically impact your credit score, if at all?
Okay, so surprisingly, your student loans have minimal impact on your credit score if you are paying them back on time and paying at least your minimum payments. If you are in the green with your student loans, you'll see very little impact on your credit score, both positive or negative. But once you get into that stage where you're missing payments and you're in default, you'll see a dramatic impact in your credit score. As far as how your student loans will impact your ability to buy a home, students often or former students often learn the hard way that their debt to income ratio is severely impacted by student loans. So when the bank or the mortgager is looking to see what it is that you qualify for exactly, they'll take the full amount of your student loan debt, and that will weigh against you in that ratio. Regardless of what you're making monthly, regardless of what your monthly payments are on your student loans, they'll take the full amount of your student loans. And this usually has an extreme impact on students who went to graduate school, and those especially who went on to get their PhD because they've been in school and have been borrowing money for a much longer time and often have much more money in debt overall. So that will definitely impact your ability. There are limited ways around it though, and you can work with your bank or the mortgage lender to kind of see what those loopholes might be. They can, do some playing around with the repayment plan that you're in to make it look like you'll be in a better position long term as far as interest accrued and your monthly payments. There are some options. It usually takes some more seasoned bankers or mortgage lenders to know what those options are to kind of help you out, but they do exist. So if you are in a process where you're buying a home, that's the first question you really want to ask is, do they have any knowledge of how they can maneuver your student loans so that you may be approved for the loan that you're looking for that you otherwise might not have been if they didn't make those special circumstances or that maneuvering around to help you get that mortgage loan.
Great, and thank you for the advice. I'll turn back to Stacy.
All right, well, I think that's it in terms of our audience questions. As I mentioned, there's some unanswered ones, but I promise to submit them to our presenters so that they can reach out and be in touch. Just a couple notes. We will share the recording of this with our attendees, And all of our previously recorded webinars, as well as some workshops, are posted on our website and online community. So you can visit montclair.edu/alumni. That way you can always circle back as a refresher or review any areas that you missed. We also just want to plug a couple upcoming events and activities. Our signature event, Homecoming, is on October 6th. So if you're local, please come to campus that day, and you can meet some of the great staff here and ask some questions as well. Otherwise, I look forward to sending some follow-up information and hearing from our attendees. And I'll flip it back over to Stanley and Jill for any wrap-up or final comments.
All right. Well, so to the question that we did not have time to get around to, I will definitely contact our members in the audience to answer those questions for you. Sorry we didn't have time to get around to them, but I will definitely be in touch answering those questions for you, and we can discuss those, whatever concerns or options that you're looking for.
Great. Well, thank you to Stanley and Jill for taking time out of your busy schedules with the beginning of the year to share your life experiences and your professional experiences and your wisdom with our alumni, students, and friends. I really appreciate it. And I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their afternoon.
Thanks, guys. Take care.